Hello, we are Northridge Biomechanics, and today we are going to conduct a study on superhero landings.
So you're gonna do superhero landing. Wait for it! Woo! Superhero landing!
Today, superheroes have been known for their iconic entrance called a superhero landing. There's two types of these skills. The first one is landing in a squatted position, while the other is landing in a three-point lunge. What we want to do is see which of the two landings will help us give us the fastest takeoff velocity. So, to help us conduct this study, we brought in a superhero who is not a god, a mutant, nor genetically modified. We brought in Avengers' very own Hawkeye. So Hawkeye, can you tell us your experience with drop jumps?
Well, on the job, you have to be ready for everything. I'm normally away from the action, shooting from a distance, so I don't have to practice my drop jump landings like Spider-Man or Thor. Anyways, I feel like they do it just to get attention for themselves, but that's besides the point. I like to stay in the background.
Okay, so since you had very little experience like most of us humans, we will put you through some dynamic warm-ups and practice jumps to limit possible injury, and this way we can hopefully get the best results from you. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, you ready to get started?
Let's go.
After a 10-minute dynamic warm-up, including numerous stretches and exercises, we will then direct our subject over to the 30-inch vertical box jump. We chose 30 inches because we thought that this would be the optimal height for the subject to jump from without possibly getting an injury. We told our subject that we'll give him 2 practice jumps per superhero landing, one landing in the squatted phase again, while the other one landing in the lunge phase. After this, we then told Hawkeye that we'll record each of the superhero landings into a sprint 4 times apiece. After each of the superhero landings, we told Hawkeye that he can have up to 2 minutes break for his rest interval. For the purpose of this research, the Canovia program will be used to help us determine the kinematic variables for the landing, takeoff velocities, and angular velocities about the knee and the ankle joints. The joint angles of the knee and ankle will be measured at the bottom of the landing and at full extension of the trail leg during the concentric phase of the first step. Using the difference in time between the 2 points, we can then account for the angular velocity at the knee and ankle. We also will measure the total time and distance it took from the bottom of the superhero landing to the third step of a sprint. This way we can account for linear velocity. To help give us a better understanding for the study, we brought in the rest of the team to help us out.
Since the first superhero comics hit the streets in the early 20th century, people become infatuated with the idea of their favorite superhero running to the scene of crime to save the day. In the last decade, the superhero genre has seen a massive re-emergence due to the expansion of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, starting with box office hits such as Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America, and the Avengers. With the expansion of superheroes worldwide, people have taken it upon themselves to emulate their heroes by learning more and more about martial arts like karate, jiu-jitsu, judo, Muay Thai, and parkour.
Parkour! Michael, parkour! Parkour! Extreme! Parkour!
We will determine which superhero landing allows for our heroes to jump into the battle the fastest. To do this, we will compare the linear velocities out of the 2 landings, and also compare knee velocities between the eccentric and concentric phases of these movements. There's been about as much research on superheroes as there are superheroes here in LA. So, when conducting research, we aim to find articles that explain what we could expect from the average human, and from there, estimate what a superhero could be capable of, taking into account, of course, their specific superpower. For most athletes, the most important factor for winning games is the ability to react to a moving body. Superheroes also need to be able to react quickly to whatever form of evil may be coming at them. Slowinski's study explains that the first 10 meters can be crucial when trying to accelerate into a dead sprint. He sought out to determine if there was a significant difference between a false start, when you take a squat and then step back before going forwards, a parallel squat, a jump start, and a crouch start. The research found that a crouch start was the fastest due to the amount of time it took to initiate a sprint by creating a maximal GRF. This helped us in our study because we saw that the angular velocity can be taken into consideration when measuring our subject performance. Fisher and colleagues found that knee angles during a landing and peak force production during an isometric squat were significantly correlated. They found that participants are able to produce the most force at around 90 degrees of flexion. This gives us an optimal angle for our subjects to produce the peak force during landing and convert that landing phase into a lunge.
System alert! System alert! Calling all Avengers. So I guess I'll take it from here. From several research articles that we've been looking through, we found 3 that would be helpful in creating guidelines for our research study. First was Donahue that gave us an estimated range of what to expect for the specific joint angles in the data analysis. We use their numbers as a reference since the double leg squat is similar to our squat landing and the single leg landing similar to our lunge landing, assuming that most of the weight would be on the leading leg. Second was Reg and Jay standing, where they conducted an experiment to find out what key variables would provide the best performance in the start of a sprint. They focused on the first 3 steps of the sprint that would gain maximum acceleration. From this, we also decided to measure up to the 3rd step after the jump landing into a sprint. And lastly was code, where they looked at how the stretch shortening cycle and the drop jump can best be used in producing an efficient vertical jump. From this, we expected in the drop jump to use the stretch shortening cycle to use the muscle tendon complex to produce a greater force to accelerate into the running phase following the landing. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to save the day. With the lack of information about the safest way to land, we plan to focus our efforts on developing a new training protocol for all our new heroes. This study will compare the 2 landings to discover which produces the quickest reaction time, going from a superhero landing into a sprint. Due to the rise of superheroes, it is important for the fans and the future heroes to know the fastest way to arrive at the scene of a crime. We hypothesize that landing in a lunge position will produce a faster takeoff velocity because it mostly resembles a sprinter's starting stance out of the blocks.
So the results are in. So after calculating the results after the squat landing into a sprint, the average knee velocity is negative 4.03 radians a second. The negative explains that it is going into extension. The average ankle velocity of the squatted landing is negative 2.56 radians a second. The negative means that it is going into plantar flexion. Lastly, the average linear velocity for the squatted superhero landing is 2.75 meters a second. After calculating the results of the lunge landing into a sprint, the average knee velocity is negative 4.16 radians a second, which is faster than the squatted landing by negative 0.13 radians a second. The negative once again explains that the knee joint is going into extension. The average ankle velocity in the lunge landing is negative 1.99 radians a second, which is slower than the squatted landing. The negative means that it is going into plantar flexion. Lastly, the average linear velocity for the lunge superhero landing is 2.42 meters a second, which is slower than the squatted superhero landing.
So in conclusion, we determined that the angular velocity at the knee coming from the lunge position yielded a quicker knee extension on average when compared to the squat landing. From this, we could infer that if we were able to extend at the knee quickly, coming out of the eccentric phase of the drop landing, this would result in a quicker linear velocity. However, our results were contrary to that, as we found that the squat landing yielded a greater linear velocity on average. But when we take a look at the angular velocity at the ankle, we saw a positive correlation with the squat takeoff and linear velocity. If we refer to the research done by Struzik and company, in the first 10 meters of a sprint acceleration, they found that the angular velocity at the ankle was more statistically significant when it related to sprint acceleration in comparison to the knee, although further studies may be needed to corroborate. When we took a closer look at the degrees of flexion at the knee joint at the bottom of the drop jump and the time it took to get to full extension, we concluded that in the squat, the participants stopped at an optimal degree of flexion at the knee to produce greater linear velocity based on 2 articles. In Ko et al., they looked at the stretch shortening cycle during a drop jump leading into a maximal vertical jump. What we can infer from this information is that the stretch shortening cycle was most effective in the time frame of 15 to 120 milliseconds of the eccentric phase following initial toe touch during the drop jump. Although both the lunge and the squat landing fall under this parameter, we can infer that since the squat landing is in a bilateral stance, the force that the muscles produced was most evenly distributed and resulted in a better takeoff. We base that assumption on research done by Kovacs. We see that the forefoot landings and foot placement played a major role in the takeoff velocity coming from a drop jump. In our squat landing, both feet landed forefoot, while in the lunge, the trailing leg landed on the toes. Now with an explosive movement like this, safety is a huge concern. It would be interesting to see the effective force on the leading leg of the lunge during the landing and push off into the sprint by using a force plate. That would give us a better idea of the forces that are affecting the hip, the knee, and the ankle joints. Based off of what the participant reported, he felt unsafe landing in the lunge position. Think about this. In a lunge, the weight distribution is 60% for the lead leg and 40% in the back. With the addition of takeoff, it would compound the force on the knee joint, leading to a higher probability of injury. If there is even a slight valgus or varus loading, the injury risk is even higher. Given this new information, if we were to reconduct this study, we would base our hypothesis on the idea that the squat landing allowed for a better takeoff position coming from a drop jump because the weight distribution is evenly balanced among both legs, foot placement is perfect, and the depth of the knee flexion allowed for an optimal takeoff when compared to the lunge landing. For our original assumption, we thought that the landing in a lunge would give us a better and a faster takeoff velocity based on the idea that it closely resembled a sprinter takeoff. We were wrong, and that's A-okay.
This study has implications in the realm of sports performance as this situation can apply to a multitude of different sports. For example, if you look at a basketball player coming down from a dunk and trying to get back on defense, it is essentially a drop jump into a sprint. If you look at a ballerina dancer landing from a jump and attempting to rebound and transfer their momentum into another movement, it is another drop jump into an explosive movement. We can even look at football. Imagine a jumping catch going into a sprint for a touchdown. From elite athletes to the mightiest Avengers, knowing how to properly land and continue that movement into a sprint efficiently gives us, our heroes, a better way to spring into action to save the day.
Thanks for tuning in. We are
Northridge Biomechanics!
Alright guys, which research idea should we do next?
I like that one. Let's look at that.
That's alright.
Yeah, this one looks good too. What do you think about this one?
I like that one.
Yeah.
What about you, Kim?
I don't think so. I like that one better.
What kind of research are you talking about?